Stephen, I'm curious as to your thoughts on the president's remarks on that. What'd you make of those?
Well, first, you sort of have to put a giant grain of salt next to everything he says with regard to numbers. He seems to move with great fluidity from millions to billions to trillions, and
That's
somewhere in that range is reality. And there's a pretty big difference between both ends of that spectrum. And so I never quite know what number are we really talking about. But the principle is good that, yes, we should be competitive, don't cede the battle space to the Chinese. However, there are some specific numbers that matter a great deal. And I think he came up very short with regard to what President Trump started in pressing the Europeans and NATO members to honor their own commitments. It wasn't even that the United States was pressing for something. They all signed on to pay 2% of their GDP into a collective self-defense model. And not only are they not living up to their own commitment to themselves, the amount of aid the United States is giving the Ukrainians to defend themselves is like twice the amount of all of Europe combined. And so we are way failing the idea of Europeans taking care of Europeans. It's still, in a way, welfare for the Europeans. And that part is extremely disappointing to me.
Yeah, I do agree, and I think it is kind of, it's been welfare because the United States is NATO, and we've been funding everything. That's what the whole, correct me if I'm wrong, but that was the whole bust up that Trump had with Angela Merkel, because he was basically called her a welfare state.
Yeah, well, I mean, they were playing both sides in a way that was, I think, really cynical. It was very bad for America's interests, but I think it was really bad for a lot of European interests, and the Ukrainians are paying for it right now. So as much as everyone wants to virtue signal by going and having their side by side with Zelensky, they're not really living up to where the rubber meets the road.
Yeah.
And that part, I think, really, if a president wants to lead, you got to go there and basically be like Trump. You don't mind being the skunk at the garden party. You're there to kind of let the truth out. They just got to live with it.
I got the skunk at the garden party. I didn't mean that was good. Talking to Stephen Yates, American First Policy and Institute. The inclusion, Turkey dropping their opposition to the inclusion of Finland and Sweden, which I think Biden called Switzerland at one point. I mean, they start with SW, so it's Biden. That I was kind of surprised to see Turkey stop opposing their entrance into the organization. How did that come about?
Well, the short answer is I don't know what Erdogan's calculation is on this. He's the leader of Turkey, been there. He's sort of a Putin-like figure in the sense that he straddles a lot of different divides. Asia and Europe is one of them. Clearly a NATO member, but doesn't mind buying military material from Russia. And so my sense is he sort of found the limits of where he felt he could push within NATO. He probably hasn't compromised his ability to get more material from Putin should he want it. And so I thought it was basically a pretty shrewd, self-interested move on their part. I'm not saying it's good. I'm not praising a bad man. It's just, if you look at just the deal-making part of it, I think he saw the room fighting amongst itself. Europe, unfortunately, contrary to the dominant narrative, is showing some provocative weakness here. Yeah. And so I think he's within his enlightened national self-interest to play both sides. And so that's what I think he's done.
Yeah, he has done. The talking with Stephen Yates, there was a story that came out saying a U.S. commander said Russia and China's partnership means that the U.S. must prepare for attack on GUAM. The Indo-Pacific Command wants additional funding to build up facilities, a piece that came out about this. And then, of course, we have the story with NATO expanding. It does seem like there was a bit of a pivot with his remarks that NATO exists to counter Russia, but now we're starting to look towards the Pacific and we have two nuclear capable entities here who are geopolitical foes. Do you think, first off, does that sound Chicken Little to you? Is it that serious, that immediate right now? In terms of, that partnership and China's ability to act? And secondly, is NATO's focus expanding?
Yeah, well, NATO has had an improvement in the way it's talked about China. And I think it's important because China is not a regional issue. It's a global issue. It gets into our societies. It's in every region of the planet. And so I think any kind of alliance that takes itself seriously, and I think it's up for debate whether NATO really takes itself seriously enough, at least they're engaging this conversation in a way that I think is a net improvement. Certainly, it would be a disservice to themselves and to their dominant funder if they were engaging in behavior that made the world less safe for us by enabling the Chinese. And I think they did that for a while and have come up to a sobriety checkpoint. And so I think that there's net progress on that. But if they can't really meet their own commitments to take care of other Europeans, we can't exactly bank on them tilting the global scales. But really, it's the Russians and the Chinese that are out there playing the Cold War revival game and then sitting back and saying, hey, comrade, stop engaging in Cold War thinking. So, I mean, I think it's rational for everyone to say these guys are colluding. And if you're going to sanction one, you got to look at sanctioning both. If you're going to disengage from one, you need to look at disengaging from both. If you're going to say Putin and the Russian model are evil and destructive, you can't kind of whitewash what's going on with China and the China model. And it's a hard, big pill to swallow, but we don't really get a choice because they are colluding.
I don't like that word with those two entities. Talking with Stephen Yates, and you can find him at YatesComms on Twitter. Was this a successful summit? I mean, I know it's Biden, and you have, tone deaf foreign policy people handling and guiding this administration, I think, for the most part. He was talking about going to Saudi Arabia, but not to ask for an increase in oil. But was it successful in sending the message that I think that they intend to send to Putin? I mean, there was the joking with Russian propaganda where you had Trudeau and Boris Johnson, and they were joking about taking shirtless, riding horses shirtless and doing some propaganda that way. And Putin was petty and struck back with a lame comment. But I mean, was it a success? Basically, is what I'm asking.
In my view, no. And I might be a harsh judge of these things, but and I'm probably going to flub it with the audience, but I don't know if any of them watched the old PBS show, Are You Being Served?, where the old owner would walk out all the time and just sort of shakily say, you've all done very well. And he would walk off and everyone would clap. And this was at a department store. I kind of feel like we have an old person getting up on stage and just saying, hey, we've all done very well. And everyone claps and walks off. No one is moved by this. No one is impressed by this. There's no bloody dictator in the world that goes, oh no, shiver me timbers. These guys are coming for me. We better stop doing what we're doing. I think that the Europeans, including some of our good allies, are falling into the Democrat overly used approach of warfare as pure comms exercises. So they'll talk about memes, they'll talk about snark. And I love snark, but it doesn't win any wars.
Right.
And it doesn't deter anybody from doing bad things. And the fact of the matter is the Russians are gaining ground in Yugoslavia while these guys are getting together and breaking their arms, patting themselves on the back while they're underfunding their own alliance, and they're underfunding the guy that they want to stand like shoulder to shoulder with in the Ukraine. So I don't know how anyone in the real world can take it seriously.
That's a great point. Underfunding that effort, and especially if they're trying to send a message, and having all of these nation state members underfunding their own defense, because they were talking a great game. Oh, we expanded NATO's borders, but if you can't facilitate or you can't finance the defense of those borders, then with each individual country with their own sovereign areas, then what does it matter?
Exactly. So, we just have to focus on actions rather than posturing. I think this was a posture summit. And as far as I'm concerned, no one's moved by all of that. And if I felt like I was at risk, if I was on that periphery with Russia, posture wouldn't do a whole heck of a lot for me. What material are you going to sell to me? And what can I count on in real deterrence and defense? And what are you going to do to restructure the financial system if we're supposed to move away from Russia and perhaps China on energy, technology, and other areas? They didn't answer any of that.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, too. We're talking with Stephen Yates, this Bloomberg piece. China's Xi declares Hong Kong is reborn after overcoming risks. His first time outside the mainland in almost 900 days. And I guess this was his victory lap, kind of? That's how I'm looking at it?
Yeah, it's just supremely gross to me. On the one hand, he stayed within the People's Republic of China. This Winnie the Pooh guy has still never left his own country since day one of the COVID outbreak. And that should be a major signal to the rest of the world about the stability of China and what they're going through politically, economically, and health-wise. So they talk about this 900 days. You're 3 years without leaving your country. That's not normal.
I mean, I've left my country.
Is not leaving your country.
Yeah. Do you think that if he were to leave and then come back, because there's always another commie to replace him, but I know that there are factions within Beijing. Is he worried about being deposed?
I don't know how else you explain why someone who's supposedly this supreme emperor for life either just feels lazy enough that he doesn't have to go anywhere and make the world come and kiss his ring, or I don't care, I don't want to risk leaving this room because someone's going to close the door and lock it behind me, or worse. And so I don't know if it's paranoia or if it's arrogance, but it is conspicuous and weird, if you ask me, and kind of walking on the tomb of a formerly free and wonderful place like Hong Kong is just gross. And if all of these Europeans wanted to celebrate freedom and solidarity and all this for the rest of the world, maybe have a peep about this at that summit. Maybe have a peep at the White House or the State Department beyond the reheated leftover talking points of the last 20 years.
There you go. Yeah, that's I was reading that apparently 3,000 people had to quarantine ahead of this. Everybody that was participating in their celebrations, their state theater. Goodness. Stephen Yates at YatesComs on Twitter. Stephen, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Dana. Take care.
Of course. You too.